Welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I talk to C-suite leaders about the real crap they've faced, and they get to be super vulnerable with me. And this episode with Kelly Lazuka is no exception to that. Kelly was super vulnerable in a way I so appreciated. She really goes deep with some of the crazy situations that she was in, mistakes she's made, and what she carried forward from that. And I so appreciate all the different places Kelly took us on her journey and the hard lessons that she learned. And I know you're going to get a lot out of this and also have a lot of fun. So, welcome to the episode. Welcome, friends, to It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is, where I get to talk to real leaders, real talk with them. And today is no exception. I'm very excited about my conversation here with Kelly Lazuka. Kelly, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
And Kelly, you are the CEO of Fullerton in the Chicago area. I'll let you talk more about what Fullerton does.
Sure.
And can you give us also a little bit of an arc of your career of how you got to that CEO role? Some of us are, I always knew I was going to be a CEO, and some of us just wound up, like weird pathway to the seat. So, love to hear a little bit more about that and also the problems that Fullerton solves.
Sure. Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here and speak with you, Meg, today. So Fullerton. Um, Fullerton is what we call a national turnkey provider in the connectivity space. So in simplest terms, we design, we engineer, and we build the infrastructure that makes wireless and broadband networks work. So your internet at home needs fiber. We put that fiber in the ground. Your cell phone, the little pocket computers that we all carry around, they have to work, and we make sure we deploy those networks to make sure that those cell phones work. So we also deploy networks in stadiums and hospitals and transportation hubs. So, like when you're sitting at a Cubs game, and before years ago, you would try and send a text or send a video or send a photo, and it just wouldn't go through, right? So, we now help design those systems that actually support that demand for all of that data. I mean, data is just exploding right now. Our need for it, right? So what really sets that apart, what really sets us apart and kind of the problems we solve is we take on the complexity of those projects. So from the design on the front end, getting the permits and the permissions from the landlords and the jurisdictions, and then we actually can construct those sites. So our customers are then able to focus on their core business. So, we're not just building this really strong network, but for us it's also about investing in our people and building really strong teams. So we like to create our leadership pipeline from within. So that's really what Fullerton does in a nutshell. But how did I get to the C level? Well, no, if the question is, did I always want to be think I was going to be a C-suite, professional? The answer is no. I did not, early on in my career have those aspirations. And I actually started out really kind of at the very, very bottom of the food chain in this industry. I've been in this industry. It was my first like real adult job. I've been doing it for 27 years now. But I started out as what we call the site acquisition specialist. And what that was is I actually would go and meet with farmers in like rural Illinois and try and get them to lease a piece of their land so that companies like AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile could build a cell tower on their land, and then we would pay them a monthly lease for that piece of land. And I thought I like hit the jackpot. I had a company car and a company credit card. I was living in hotels. I was young and single, and um, I had the greatest experience with these farmers because they and their families, I think, just kind of took pity on me. Like I was on the road, I was eating takeout all the time, fast food, and they would invite me over for dinner. And it was great. I got to meet so many interesting people just, and talking about our industry and just talking about their lives and giving them a little bit more, another little revenue income, right, by leasing a piece of land to us. So that's how I started out. And I did that for a lot of years. And then I kind of started to like, okay, now I think I can teach that. I think I can boss people around. I could be a boss. And so I, kind of moved up that whole path of like project manager and um, program manager. I think at one time I held the title of like troubleshooter. I thought that was a really big deal. And then I got to that director, vice president level. And then I started thinking, okay, now I'm starting to see how all the pieces work. Um, I think maybe, about probably, I'll say about 10 years ago, I started to think, I think I want more. I can get a seat at the table. And then the company that I was at, I was a vice president at the time, and they were bought by a larger company, and I didn't want to go with that larger company, so Fullerton took a chance on me. They brought me in as president of their wireless services, and a year after they brought me in, they appointed me CEO. So
Okay.
it's been a
Yeah.
crazy ride. Yeah.
Yeah. That's honestly, that is not that uncommon of a story, Kelly. It's really interesting how people end up in these situations where they realize I'm going to be in a big corporation and I don't want to.
Yes.
That story is becoming more and more common. And frankly, the rise of the big corporation has stopped. And it's
Yes.
truly now we're in the era of the rise of smaller businesses. And that's the
That's right.
vast majority of the economy because it's just more opportunity for us, and especially those of us who love troubleshooting and achieving new things and having new challenges. And you're wired that way, right?
Well, and just having that agility, right? The less red tape, I think,
Mhm.
and the agility to the flexibility to kind of make changes and grow and scale and, not having to have all of that bureaucracy. I think that's really appealing to people.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, when you go to those smaller businesses, you've got less sophistication, less
Hmm.
resources, right? And you've been in a number of companies and some of them where there's less red tape, that also means it's more on you. You've got to
Hmm.
figure stuff out. There's more friction. There can be more drama in some
Yes.
family businesses and those types of settings where there's less formal leadership development and just resources for that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
So
Yes.
tell us about some of the differences you've experienced in these smaller environments where there's big friction, where you've hit cultural problems, or even in corporate America. Like, what are some of those cultural difficulties that you've hit, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. I can give you an actual example that might put it in better context for everybody. You hit it on the head. In a larger company, it's harder to lay people off. It's harder to, there's like I said, there's a lot more red tape. But when you're in a smaller company, you know, that flexibility that I mentioned, sometimes your bosses, I have a board that I report to, they want you to make decisions right away. And sometimes it's just not that easy. And I would probably say the hardest moment that I faced was like 3 months into my tenure as a CEO. So my first C-suite position, I'm 3 months in, and my board is like, "Yeah, you're over-resourced. You need to lay off a significant number of people."
Mm,
And in looking at that, I realized on paper it did look that way, but they had a problem pre-Kelly. They had a problem before me, and that was that they had been over recognizing revenue. So by that, I mean, they were taking revenue for work that hadn't yet been completed.
mhm.
So I still had this problem of the customers were still expecting the work to be done, but now they wanted me to lay off the people because it didn't seem that the revenue matched the costs of the resources, right?
Right.
We weren't covering the costs. And so I couldn't do that because I was worried about the company's reputation. I was worried about my reputation. And like I said, we still need to deliver on this work. So to be honest with you, that was the day I almost quit. I thought, okay, like 3 months. I had a good run as CEO, right?
Tried
Um,
it,
and,
not for me.
and quite honestly, I'm older now and I was just so tired. I think as we get to this point in our lives, we're kind of like, yeah, we're we're good. We don't need the challenges. Like I'm good. Like give me the low hanging fruit, right? And I, I think that's kind of where my mind was going. But I had this team. I had actually brought people into this company, and I wasn't ready to give up. And so I just kind of sat down and reframed the problem.
Mhm,
And I showed that, we don't have a resource problem, we have a revenue recognition problem.
mhm,
And cutting those people are going to hurt us even more. Our profitability would actually have been this, it would have been very positive if revenue was recognized at the appropriate time.
okay.
And so in taking that data and reframing it and going to my board with the facts, I was able to keep the team intact, deliver for our customers, probably strengthen the company.
Mhm,
Um, but at the same time, it's tempting as it is to take that easy path. I realized that my leadership brand is just not about that easy path, no matter how much I think I want it sometimes. Just like no matter how much you say, I'm going to sleep in this weekend. And then at 6 o'clock, you're looking at your clock like, I can't sleep in, right? Kind of the same thing. You want to take the easy path, but it's just not in you. And so leadership to me became holding steady, when everything in you really wants to walk away, and then kind of balancing the conviction for your team with the hard facts. That
mhm,
human side of our business is always going to matter, but sometimes pairing it um, with hard data not only allows you to fight for your people but your customers and your business. And
mhm.
so that was really tricky for me because that board, they were like, I'm looking at the numbers and let's make some quick changes. And um, it kind of bit me in the, where I thought, oh, going to a smaller company, we can make changes more quickly. We can make decisions more quickly. Well, that kind of came back and bit me in this sense. But thankfully, I was able to kind of slow them down. So
Yeah, and you didn't really have the trust established and the relationships in
correct.
place. So you were going into that argument without a lot of rapport. And
Absolutely.
so you had to be really careful also.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's extra tricky. So um, I like how you talk about that balance between the people and the numbers. And when you're in the C-suite, you have to have a sharp focus on both.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right people and cultivating talent, then you're not going to make the numbers. But if the numbers aren't there, you're not going to be able to keep your talent, right? There's no people
Right.
without profit. So
Right.
sometimes there's tension and these decisions that we have to make that are really hard. And sometimes we have these financial goals and we realize it's the people side holding us back. We have to put a lot more time and care on the people side. And like a mentor once said to me, it's culture usually eats strategy for breakfast. It's the people side that ends up being a little bit trickier and the problems can creep in little subtle, insidious ways. And all of a sudden you're not hitting your numbers, right?
Mhm.
And I made the mistake of being way overly focused on the numbers. And then all of a sudden the people problems would creep in. I think you're probably wiser than me in the
I don't
C-suite
know about
role, but
that.
I
Yeah.
feel like I've made every mistake you can make. Um, so do you have examples of that, of how like cultural friction, you started to sniff it out, right? And realize there's some people issues here. There's maybe gaps in some of the skills of my leaders. There's a lack of accountability or unnecessary drama, some collaboration not
Yeah.
going well. Yeah, how did you sniff it out and how did you address it?
Yeah. So when I first stepped into this role, I learned pretty quickly that we didn't have the right customers. Our financial targets were not realistic, and the culture at the company was very, very siloed. It really was, every division and frankly, every person was operating for themselves.
Ooh,
The strategy on paper, it didn't matter. It wasn't worth the paper it was written on because the culture underneath to support that strategy was completely broken.
okay.
So we shifted the focus, and that's that. I spent a lot of time on kind of repositioning our culture, and so I I got our board to see that we needed to invest in building a culture that was accountable, cohesive, collaborative, and we just started educating our people on the financials. So there's a lot of companies that keep the financial piece, kind of away from the day-to-day activities. And I feel that educating our people on their in division financials, it really helped them understand not just their projects, but how their cost structures and profitability affect the entire company. And so that transparency started to create better leaders and a shared sense of responsibility. But you said it, cultural shifts, they don't always happen without really tough decisions. And I had to replace some of those legacy leaders
Mm,
who, like you said, were dramatic and toxic and
mhm,
really unwilling to get on board with a cultural overhaul, if you will. And it was difficult. It really was. And there's loyalty that's built even, with bad leaders. And but in their place, we brought in new leaders, new leadership who embrace that accountability and collaboration. And when you change out leadership at that level, what I found was that it starts to create this ripple effect and the whole company feels that shift. So
mhm,
people either, rise to this new standard or they opt out. And in some cases, opting out is not the worst thing.
mhm,
And it gave us really a clean slate to reset expectations. And the other thing that we did that I thought was really important in kind of getting that collaboration to the level that we needed it to be is we changed our bonus structure. It was something that was very simple, but less obvious, I think to a lot of people. And instead of everyone just being rewarded or bonused annually on their own performance or their own division or projects, the majority of their bonus became tied to overall company performance.
Great.
So now suddenly everyone wants to help each other, right? Everybody's
Mhm,
marching to the same drum. People began working together far more, better than I've ever seen, and really supporting and aligning each other and aligning with each other on
mhm.
um, common goals. So that result was the delivery improved. We could take on turnkey projects because they were coordinating better with each other.
Yeah.
And we got to be a little bit more selective about our customers. We didn't just have to take bottom of the barrel projects to stay busy.
Mhm,
We could focus on profitable strategic work.
mhm.
And it didn't just improve morale, but it really changed the trajectory of our company. And so right there, I think that's your clearest proof that
Yeah.
culture does really, what'd you say, eat strategy for breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can also fuel your strategy, right? And really, your
Yes.
culture should be designed to support the strategy. And if you say you're turnkey and you're going to have something internally that's going to make a complex situation happen, people have to collaborate. And yet that wasn't being valued in the
Yeah,
company.
no. And
So,
they, to take on turnkey projects, how the company was set up before, would not have been successful. They weren't communicating,
yeah,
across
yeah.
division. Yeah.
And it's so funny. I part of the work that I do is I'll run an assessment of the health of an organization, right? And I remember I ran this assessment of health and I was
Mhm.
talking to the CEO and I said, no one knows what each other does in this company. And they all really want to know what's going on over here because you're importing these problems between departments because no one understands who the other person is and what they're doing. And there's a lot of conflict happening because you've got all these
Absolutely.
silos, right? And you're only rewarding individual contributions and you're wondering why people don't want to work together and why they're not collaborating better, but you're not rewarding it, right?
Hmm.
So you've got to reward what you want,
Right.
reward what's actually valuable to you, and you did that. You actually stood behind it with the bonuses and said we want to reward collaboration and your contribution to the whole, not just individual contribution.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Made a big difference. Yeah.
a lot of people aren't willing to put their money where their mouth is, and you
Yeah.
did it and it worked. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
That's living proof, right, that all of these books and research, it actually works in practice. So
I've read a lot of them, Meg. I've read a lot of
me too.
them.
So you've read all these books on leadership, you've had all these experiences, and we've
Yeah.
often learned things the hard way. And sometimes we learn how to lead by looking at people who suck at leading, right?
That's
Sometimes
right.
We learn how we want to lead by seeing how we don't want to lead or being led by those people. Can you give me an example of a bad boss, what you
Yeah.
learned from that and what you've carried forward in your leadership?
Yeah. Yeah, so I did. I've had bad bosses. I've had great bosses, but I've had a few doozies. There's no doubt about it. And I remember very early on in my career, I was sitting in I was sitting in a big conference room with my boss, and there were a few other senior leaders in there as well. And I had just finished a project I was really, really proud of, and it was just an internal proposal. It wasn't for a customer. It was actually for a company-wide operational readiness plan. So basically, we were struggling with getting projects off the ground quick enough, and that was a common feedback from our customers. And so, I just came up with a way to do that a little bit more quickly and efficiently. And, it took me hours of research, and I met with project managers to get their feedback and what works for them, what they would like to see. And I worked with our business systems to leverage the tools that we had, and, lots and lots of revisions later. I was really excited to share these results because I was very young in the management level of my career. So I was excited, maybe get a little pat on the back, a little recognition. And then when the meeting began, before I could even start my presentation, my boss took over the presentation. And he used phrases like, look what I came up with. And here's what I'm thinking. And as he went through all of my slides, and I'm like, I'm sitting right here. I couldn't believe that um, he was taking credit without doing any of the legwork on this, and did not make this even a collaborative. Like, I could have handled the word we, right? I didn't need all the credit. It could have been collaborative, but that wasn't the case. He used the word I, and it was really discouraging for me as I looked around that table and I saw that the other leadership team was, nodding along, and they were clearly impressed with the proposal. But it was in that moment I learned two things. So first, I learned the kind of leader he was. And that is, to me, it was, the kind that would steal your lunch and just eat it right in front of you. But second, I realized the kind of leader I did not want to be. And I never, ever, ever wanted to be the kind of leader who takes credit for someone else's work.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to be the leader who recognizes and celebrates my team,
Mhm.
that person who sees that potential in others, who lifts them up. That's why collaboration is so, so very important to me
Mhm.
as a leader. But you know, I remember sitting there thinking, and I kept my cool, which I know we haven't known each other that long, Meg, and your audience doesn't know me, but that is not an easy feat for me. I'm very confrontational. And it's something I work on every single day because it doesn't always benefit me. But in this instance, I really did keep my cool. But I also thought, when I have the chance to lead, I would do it differently. And I would make sure that my leadership brand recognizes loudly and proudly the contributions of my team, of others. And that made me really angry. I was really upset. I was really discouraged that day, but I learned something. I mean, there,
Mhm.
there was a silver lining there. I learned something that stuck with me. And it's really influenced the leader that I've gone on to become. You want your team to follow you into the fire. You don't want them to sit there and throw more gasoline on you. And if you recognize your team's contributions, you systematically create this loyalty. And honestly, they're going to make you look damn good.
Yeah, yeah. You certainly don't want a team that's telling you there's no fire. You don't want a team throwing gasoline on the fire, right? And if you're the kind of leader that's taking credit for everything, your team doesn't feel like you have their back. And then
No.
ultimately, like my values formed as a leader having those kinds of experiences.
Mhm.
Adversity kind of teaches us who we are and what we value,
Right.
unfortunately. So, yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, I'm gonna bite on it. You referred to being very direct and maybe having a bit of a temper. And I have an Irish heritage and a bit of a temper too, and have had to really don't do a lot of work on my own self-management, right?
Same.
So sometimes we have to learn things in leadership by making mistakes ourselves, realizing we were our own worst enemy in a certain situation, or we were really battling a personality trait, an old mindset, or a skill gap. So, what's an example of that that you can give us where you really had to learn something, develop something about yourself? What did you carry forward from that?
So yeah, I could say that. So my two worst traits, and I've been asked this a lot when I do panels and things, and people ask what are the things that you actually work on daily, and the two things that I always say is I am confrontational. I've gotten so much better, and I need to develop more patience. I have not gotten so much better with that. Still, that's still a huge work in progress, um but those two things are those are character flaws, I'll say, that I work on daily. But really, when I think about the biggest battle that I've had with myself, um, that has affected that had the potential to affect how I was how I led a team, how my team delivered, how what our productivity was. I'm gonna say that I thought as CEO that I had to kind of carry everything. I had to fix everything. I had to prove I could solve every problem. I had to make every decision. I had to kind of be that glue to hold that holds everything together. And that was inexperience. That was inexperience of being operating at that level. And the truth is that that mindset, not only was it burning me out, but it was holding my company back and it was making me the bottleneck for them. And
Mhm,
it was causing more problems,
mhm,
and it's not just at work. At the same time, you're juggling, for me, and most of us, we're working parents. I'm juggling life as a mom of five. I mean, most of my kids are grown, but uh, two of my daughters, they chose very dangerous careers, and one's a police officer in Atlanta, and one's a Marine, and it meant a lot of sleepless nights, praying they come home safe, and just when you take that stress from home, and you add in traditional responsibilities of running a household, like laundry and cooking and packing lunches and doing homework and shuttling kids, that are still at home, you kind of get to this point where you're carrying the weight of the world both at work and at home. And I mean, if I'm being honest, wine has helped me cope more than once. You can cut that if you want. But the turning point was when I realized that I couldn't keep doing it all. I was hindering my team at work.
mhm.
Just focused on everything, and not, and fixing everything myself, and not letting my leaders lead.
Yeah.
And so once I started to trust them and delegate those responsibilities and let those people step up, you hired them for a reason. Like, you
Mhm,
got to trust them at some point. Um, letting them step up. I not only saw less stress for me, but it was just better results across the board for
mhm,
everybody. And it's not about carrying the entire load. It's about building that team strong enough to carry that load with you.
mhm.
And I mean, I find myself slipping back into those old habits
Yeah.
sometimes, but I'd like to think that I'm getting better about reminding myself to trust the people around me. Look at that big picture and just let go of some of the weight. Like, give yourself that
Mhm,
permission to let go. And
mhm.
really, it's made me a better leader. It's made me a better mom, and
Yeah.
probably a little less dependent on wine, maybe.
Yeah. I've always said it's okay to have an intentional relationship with mood altering substances.
It's very intentional, mine is. Yes,
This
indeed.
this is a hard world, and some of us take on big challenges and
Yes.
apparently have kids that do too. Yep.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, no, I really appreciate that insight. There's certain traits about us, like your urgency, that can show up as impatience. You're
Yes.
always going to feel urgency. You're wired that way. Okay. It's all in how we manage it. And now you're starting to realize you've been given the opportunity to learn how to really reflect and ask yourself, do I need to own this? Do I even need to be involved in this?
Yeah.
Is this something I can let someone else really own and run with? And it comes from a good place when we're controlling and rescuing and doing all the work ourselves. It comes from a good place, but it's destructive in the long game.
It is. It is.
So
Truly.
that it's a lesson all leaders have to learn, and we usually all learn it the hard way. That's
Hmm.
ubiquitous, right? So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so on this note of like personal growth and development,
Yeah.
if you ever show me a leader that says, "I have arrived, I don't need any more development, I want to run the other way," because that is not anyone I want to work with.
Right.
So
Right.
when it comes, you're at the C-suite, you're at the pinnacle of your career-wise, but I know that you're reflective and growing still and
Yes.
challenging yourself. So what is this next era for you? What does that look like so you can
Yeah.
ultimate fulfillment and influence in the world around
Yes. Well, I think it's twofold for me. I think first of all, it's getting that optimal fulfillment in my current position. And, while over the last 3 years, I do feel like I've accomplished a great deal as CEO at Fullerton. Um, I think that there's a little bit more that I want to do here. I mean, right now, we've transformed the company. My team and I, increased profitability year over year. So when we look at where were compared to 3 years ago, I mean, we're just way better positioned. And that kind of growth, I have to say another shout out to my team. It doesn't happen without an incredible team, and I'm really, proud of what we've built together. But I know that there's more ahead. And so the next area of growth is for me is expanding our construction business.
Mhm.
I want to be involved in like acquiring a general contractor and integrating it into the Fullerton umbrella, and then scaling that side of the business very quickly and very profitably. I don't have a lot of experience with mergers and acquisitions, and so that would really challenge me to stretch kind of that new muscle around M&A integration and that kind of more rapid scale.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the first part of where I want to continue to kind of push myself. But secondly, you know, I have been fortunate in the role that I've been in, and I'm very fortunate to my board for taking the chance on me. But um, when I think about my next area of personal growth, it's really about influence and impact beyond this current day-to-day role.
Mhm.
I recently launched, I was telling you, a speaker platform,
Mhm.
and that really excites me. That opportunity to share what I've learned about building strong leaders and strong cultures
Mhm.
with organizations across, all different industries.
Mhm.
I'm certainly especially passionate about guiding aspiring female leaders,
Mhm.
helping them find their voice, grow their confidence, and thrive in spaces where they may still be a minority, because that's the world I'm coming from. I come from a very male dominated industry. Plus the idea of making my own schedule, getting paid to speak, connecting with audiences, um, on both leadership and culture. I'll say it really feels like the natural next step for me.
Mhm.
It's a way to take those lessons from my own journey, like
Mhm.
I said, including being a woman, leading in a male dominated industry, and then using them to inspire, maybe shape the next generation of leaders. And that would be super fulfilling and impactful, and honestly less stressful than the constant operational grind of running a company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've seen this trend in a lot of us as we really kind of hit the top of the mountain, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? That we realize that we're so passionate about service to other people to not have to have some of the same struggles we did.
Yes.
Even imposter syndrome, which is so common for so many women, just
Yes.
to be able to go influence and support people in a way that we wish we would have had more support. I always say, I wish I would have had a me as a support or coach or even just as a boss. And it's a way to give back that really helps you also reflect on your own career and continue to grow and learn as you're
Yeah.
interacting and supporting other people. It's
Yeah.
always a growth opportunity for me and a learning opportunity for me to
Mhm.
go and speak and interact in those settings. So that just sounds perfectly aligned for you. That sounds really
Thank you.
inspiring.
I'm excited. I'm excited about it. Next step, right?
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
chapter. Yeah.
So reflecting back, Kelly, my last question for you
Okay.
is if I can give you a time machine and you could go
Okay.
back and talk to that emerging leader you a decade or two ago, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, um, 10, 15 years. I think I would tell myself, think bigger sooner.
Hmm.
I think I played it safe. I was inexperienced, and I thought, success meant keeping things more steady and avoiding a lot of risk. But I think what I've learned is that growth does come from stretching, taking on challenges that feel maybe just a little bit too big.
Mhm.
We don't get better if things continue to be easy. I'd probably also remind myself to have a little bit more confidence, stop caring so much about what people think. Being in a male dominated industry, I spent a lot of time throughout my career worrying about every single comment, every critique, whether or not I was being judged.
Mhm.
Um, but instead of letting those comments disarm you, I would tell myself, just use it as fuel to keep moving forward. And I think finally, and I think this is a really important one. And I've found it to be more and more important the older I get, is just not to take everything so seriously. Leadership, business, life, as a mom, as a wife,
Mhm.
it just can all feel like such a constant pressure, but you have to make time to laugh and enjoy that ride, not just focus on the destination. Those challenges that we face every single day, they're always going to be there, maybe in a different way, shape, or form, but that joy will also be there if
Mhm.
if you let yourself see it.
Man, I wish I could take you back to me 15 years ago too.
I do get asked this question a lot, and it's, every couple of years I feel like I would tell myself something different. Like you
Yeah,
learn so much, each year in your life, as your
yeah,
career progresses, as your personal life progresses, as your kids move out of the house, like you learn all of these different things that, you do wish you could go back and say, stop sweating that small stuff.
yeah, absolutely. And there's so much good like books and media out there. Let Them, Mel Robbins. There's just a lot more discussion around that now than there was
There
back when
is.
we were younger. So,
Yes, there absolutely is. Yes.
including this podcast. So, thank you again for being with me today, Kelly. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, Meg.